It was the night shift at the local Maxwell's Market, a family-owned grocery store just barely big enough to call itself a supermarket. The store's receiving dock lay in the shadows, a few dim bulbs flickering above it. Inside, the members of Local Union 437 were hard at work restocking shelves, filling orders, and sweeping floors, keeping the place tidy while everyone else in town was asleep. Kip Big Bear Manson, the union leader and unofficial head of the night crew, took a bite of his turkey sandwich as he leaned against a pallet of canned beans, his eyes on the clock. It was just past midnight. Kip had been running the night shift at Maxwell's for nearly 2 decades, overseeing everything from inventory to keeping the peace between the workers and management. He liked things predictable. But on this night, the night Kip would remember forever, predictability didn't stand a chance. A faint but unmistakable scratching sound began drifting through the store's receiving bay. Kip cocked an ear, his sandwich paused mid-air. The scratching turned to a scraping, and then to a guttural huffing and growling. At first, he dismissed it as a raccoon or stray dog pawing through the alley dumpster for scraps. He threw his sandwich wrapper in the trash and brushed his hands on his overalls. "Phil," he called over his shoulder to one of his buddies. "Sounds like we got critters out back again. Grab the broom." Phil, a thin, wiry guy with a constant toothpick in his mouth, sighed but reached for the broom leaning against the wall. "Critters, huh?" he muttered as they walked toward the loading dock door. "Last week, I'm out here chasing off 2 skunks. What's it gonna be tonight, a possum?" Kip chuckled, pulling the chain on the old metal door to lift it. A gust of cold, damp air hit them. It was pitch dark beyond the glow of the overhead lights, and the odor of something foul drifted in with the breeze. "You smell that?" Phil asked, wrinkling his nose. Before Kip could respond, a massive figure stepped into the light. It was over 7 feet tall, covered head to toe in a thick, matted coat of hair, with eyes that glinted yellow in the dim light. Its shoulders were broader than any human's, and its hands, as big as dinner plates, curled into fists at its sides. Kip and Phil stood frozen, brooms held like swords, their jaws slack. Bigfoot. The creature sniffed the air, its eyes narrowing as it spotted them, and with a deep grunt, it lumbered over to the dumpster, ripping off the lid as if it were a flimsy piece of tinfoil. With one sweep of its arm, it emptied the contents onto the ground, picking through rotting lettuce, stale bread, and broken egg cartons with surprising finesse. Kip swallowed, his bravado melting away as the creature eyed him. But he had a job to do, and his union pride wouldn't let him back down. "Phil," he muttered, "go get the others." Phil darted inside, shouting for backup. In minutes, 6 men, some half-dressed in their aprons, some holding broom handles, mop heads, and even a box cutter, were assembled, staring down the creature. It continued its rummaging, unfazed by the small mob of men gathering behind it. "All right, you big hairy thing," Kip barked, stepping forward. "You're trespassing on Union property. Get out of here, or we'll—" But Bigfoot only cocked its head, watching him with something almost like amusement. Without warning, the creature lunged. Kip barely ducked as a massive arm swung past him, missing his head by inches. Chaos erupted as the men scattered, shouting in panic. Phil swung his broomstick, catching Bigfoot on the shoulder, but it only seemed to irritate him. Another guy swung a mop, which snapped in 2 against the creature's back. In seconds, Bigfoot was all over them, tossing them aside like rag dolls, one man landing in a stack of empty pallets, another crashing into a pile of empty crates. Kip managed to dodge another swipe, breathing hard. But he wasn't about to let some forest-dwelling hooligan raid his store. He shouted to the men, rallying them. "Get him! He's not going to take this place without a fight." They swarmed again, flinging anything they could grab at Bigfoot. But with each assault, Bigfoot fought back harder, a blur of hair and muscle, tossing men aside, flipping boxes, and ripping pallets apart. As the fight wore on, Bigfoot seemed only to get stronger, while Kip and his men were struggling to stay on their feet, bruised and battered. Then, with one final roar, Bigfoot charged the last of them, scattering the union workers in all directions. Kip, clutching his broom handle like a soldier with his final weapon, stood alone, face to face with the creature. But Bigfoot didn't attack him. Instead, it raised a hand open-palmed, as if offering some truce. Kip's grip loosened, his eyes narrowing. "What the hell do you want?" he asked, panting, his voice barely a whisper. Bigfoot pointed a long, hairy finger toward the receiving dock door. Inside the door, just past the mess they'd made, was the store manager's office. The following morning, the union workers came back to a very different Maxwell's Market. They entered cautiously, noting the signs hastily taped to the front windows reading, "New management in place. Please leave resumes at front desk." Phil leaned over to Kip, who was nursing a bruised arm and a black eye. "Is this real?" "He's actually the new manager." Kip grimaced but nodded. "Looks like it." Sure enough, Bigfoot, still covered in hair but now wearing a manager's apron, stood behind the counter, holding a clipboard in one hand and inspecting a pile of resumes. Occasionally, he'd grunt approvingly or snort in disdain, his massive brow furrowing as he scrutinized each applicant. When Kip approached, Bigfoot grunted and held out a hand, looking expectant. Kip sighed, handing over his own resume. Bigfoot scanned it with surprising speed, grunted again, and gave him a thumbs up. "Guess I'm hired back on, then?" Kip asked. Bigfoot nodded, scribbling something on his clipboard. Soon, Bigfoot took to his role with unexpected rigor. The aisles were spotless, the shelves organized, and inventory was running like clockwork. Bigfoot instituted Wild Wednesdays, a day when every item marked with a green price tag was 20% off. Sales shot up, and so did customer morale. Word spread around town about Maxwell's Market and its mysterious new manager with a strange sense of style and a habit of showing up late at night to personally inspect the produce. He was a stickler for quality and had a knack for sniffing out bad merchandise. Once, he caught a questionable shipment of lettuce and sent it back to the distributor, scribbling substandard on the invoice. And every Tuesday, Bigfoot would personally inspect the dumpster, ensuring nothing of value was discarded. Despite their initial reluctance, the union crew eventually fell into step with Bigfoot's unconventional leadership. He'd made Kip the assistant manager, Phil was his second in command, and every member had their shift hours carefully outlined on Bigfoot's meticulously organized clipboard. Under Bigfoot's guidance, Maxwell's became the most efficient supermarket in town. But Bigfoot's methods were not without their quirks. Every now and then, he would wander into the aisles, gently moving a can here, realigning a row of apples there, or adjusting a stack of potatoes with a critical eye. Some swore they even saw him coo at a particularly fresh bunch of bananas. He developed a complex filing system for inventory that involved pine-scented markers and color-coded stickers, and he introduced weekly community-building meetings in the loading bay, where employees were encouraged to growl it out, a venting session of sorts where they could express grievances through primal screams. Yet Bigfoot's most startling initiative came with his new union contract proposal. The workers were astounded. No manager had ever even considered such generous terms. Double time for holiday shifts, free fresh produce every month, and an impressive paid leave policy to encourage workers to get back to nature. Union members unanimously signed the contract, and Bigfoot became something of a hero among them, a legend in local Union 437. Months passed, and Bigfoot's reputation only grew. Soon, people would come from miles around just to see him in action. Some said they heard him humming an earthy tune as he stocked the shelves, others claimed he'd solved a rat problem with nothing more than an intimidating glare. And every so often, in the quiet of the night, you could still catch him raiding the dumpster, grunting happily as he sifted through expired yogurts and half-eaten apples. It was a unique setup, but it worked. Maxwell's Market had never been busier, the shelves had never been more organized, and the employees had never felt so taken care of. With Bigfoot at the helm, the union, the store, and the workers thrived. And Kip, now assistant manager, had never been prouder to work under someone so wild, so unpredictable, and yet so oddly inspiring. And as for Bigfoot? Well, he continued on as store manager for many years, his legacy growing with every produce inspection and every Wild Wednesday sale. To this day, his contract, signed with a big, hairy thumbprint, remains enshrined in the Union Hall, a testament to the time Bigfoot conquered the night shift, won the union, and led Maxwell's Market into its wildest chapter yet.